comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning. Your top stories at 9:30. Anyone who kills an emergency service worker while that worker is on duty will face a mandatory life sentence under a new piece of legislation called Harper's Law. The change follows a 2-year campaign by Lizzie Harper, whose husband, PC Andrew Harper, was killed while answering a late-night burglary call. 3 teenagers were convicted of manslaughter. His widow says the new law will help protect workers on the front line. An 8-year-old boy has become the 6th person to die following that incident in the United States when an SUV drove into a Christmas parade in Wisconsin. Darrell Brooks Jr. has been charged with 5 counts of first-degree intentional homicide. 62 people were also injured. Police have ruled out terrorism.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff.
That's NASA launching a spacecraft this morning which is going to try and crash into an asteroid, hopefully to change its course. The asteroid isn't a threat to Earth, but NASA hope if they manage to change its course, they'll be able to learn things which could help stop a hazardous asteroid in the future. The spacecraft is due to reach its target next September. And New Zealand is relaxing its strict border policies. It's letting in displaced residents from January and tourists from April. Currently, returning residents have to spend 2 weeks in a quarantine hotel run by the military.
It's just landed.
That's all your news for now. We'll have more for you at 10.
Good morning, you're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys, and we've got a show full of all of today's big stories and lots of discussion on the issues you care about. So here's what's on the menu.
Yes, a mandatory life sentence could soon be handed to those who kill an emergency worker while committing another crime after the government finally backed Harper's Law. Named after PC Andrew Harper, who was killed while on duty, it's the culmination of extensive campaigning by his wife. We'll bring you the latest on that.
Yes, and as migration across the English Channel continues to pose a huge problem for the government, our Home and Security editor, Mark White, is in Dover this morning for us, and he'll be giving us an update.
He will indeed. And Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has announced that the country's vaccine passport system will not be extended to more venues. The Scottish Government was previously considering extending vaccine passports to cinemas and theatres, but have U-turned on this. We'll look at why Sturgeon changed her mind.
That's all coming up on the programme today, and much more as well, including Prince William on population growth in Africa, a ban on virginity testing, and a transgender Girl Guide boss turned dominatrix.
We've got it all.
We'll tell you more about that later, and make sure you get in touch with your views as usual, GB Views at gbnews.uk. But first, Patrick gives his views on grooming gangs.
Why is it that police forces just don't care about grooming gangs? They'll tell you that they do. They'll tell you that they're doing everything within their power to stop them. They'll tell you that they're working tirelessly day and night to tackle the problem and that they won't rest until vulnerable young girls stop being abused on their watch. But I think they're lying, because they're not actually doing anything like that. As far as I'm concerned, it's pretty bleeding obvious that in every major town and city there will be a grooming gang. and it looks like we might be about to add another city to that list. This time, Hull. A new report has just come out raising serious questions about the police's response to child grooming gang allegations in the area. Operation Marksman, an investigation by Humberside Police into an alleged child grooming gang in Hull, wound down earlier this year with no charges against any of the 34 people arrested. This came as a massive shock to the former head of the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Service, Jim Gamble, who personally trawled through thousands of pages of evidence and concluded that the case should have gone to court. He also said that police felt they needed additional evidence, in which case they should go out and get it. And therein lies the problem, doesn't it? Police having to be proactive and actually go out and get more evidence. This is harrowing, by the way, just as a warning to people. This is the testimony from one alleged victim talking about what she saw taking place in a flat in Hull. She said, "There were young girls there, primary school age. They were in primary school uniform. I'll never forget that girl I saw sat there in a primary school uniform, probably 8 or 9 years old. She was there with her sister, who's a little bit older, and I remember her screaming in that bedroom." Humberside Police say that there is no evidence of a wide-scale organised grooming gang operating in the area. Well, in the 2 years to March 2020, Humberside Police recorded 458 reported rapes of a female aged 15 or under. A fraction of those cases resulted in charges. Girls have kept diaries and taken pictures of their injuries. Schools have numerous welfare reports flagging warnings of grooming, including recorded threats from abusers. And yet still, police bury their heads in the sand. And it gets worse. A new report from our Yorkshire correspondent, Kevin Larkin, revealed that South Yorkshire Police have been investigated in something called Operation Linden, and it focused on police conduct in 91 investigations between 1997 and 2013. It looked into 265 allegations and 44 complaints from survivors, and it concluded that there is still work to be done when it comes to tackling sex crimes. South Yorkshire Police hasn't been recording sexual crimes correctly. There are some really basic things, right, that could and should have been done, and indeed would have been done if police forces actually cared about tackling this issue. It's emerged that traffic cops can pull over a suspicious car with what appears to be a vulnerable young girl inside, but because they can't access the data from other police forces, they'll have no way of knowing whether or not that child is in immediate danger. So, if someone's trafficking a child for sex from, say, Bristol to Rotherham, if that car is pulled over in Rotherham and Bristol's police force knows that the man in that car is part of a grooming gang and that child is being groomed, South Yorkshire Police apparently will have no way of knowing that. Well, what happens there then? They presumably just wave the car on and that child goes on to face yet another evening of vile abuse. This is a loophole that needs closing, and one would have thought that in the years since thousands of vulnerable girls have been systematically abused by a gang of mostly Pakistani and Bangladeshi men, perhaps our police forces would have considered working together to try to stop the problem. Look, I have this niggling feeling in my mind, and it's not going away. I can't help but feel like police forces might think that they're doing some kind of public duty by not revealing the full scale of the problem. Why? Well, because, unfortunately, when you see the names and faces of the vast majority of grooming gang perpetrators, they do appear to be men of a certain ethnic origin. And police might not be revealing the full extent of the issue for fear of stoking racial tensions. In fact, they've actually come out and said that on numerous occasions. Vulnerable young girls don't care about racism. They care about being abused. I would urge police officers up and down the country to treat these girls as if they were their own daughters and do something about it. Yeah, it's basic stuff, isn't it? It's basic.
Yeah, I think there's lots of issues, isn't there? I mean, there's the underfunding of police.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that police don't even have resources, they say, to go and investigate burglaries nowadays. So, you know, the fact that investigating something like a grooming gang scandal is obviously a huge task, which takes up lots of resources. Not their own fault, by the way. I must say that's obviously the fault of the government and funding the police properly. So there's that issue. There's also the issue of, as you mentioned there, the Crown Prosecution Service saying, actually, we're not going to take this to court. There's not enough evidence here for a prosecution. sadly, that is the reality of it. I mean, you know, of course, we don't want to live in a world where people are being prosecuted when there's not enough evidence. Maybe that we need to look at what counts as evidence and what evidence isn't believed, and all that stuff. So there's so many issues in all of this, and of course, there's the issue of burying their head in the sand, essentially, because these girls are often they're not girls from nice middle-class homes, are they? Going to private schools. They're girls who are probably in touch with social services, who are often missing from school, who are very vulnerable to begin with, very poor. I mean, we know for a fact these are not the sorts of girls who society as a whole takes seriously. So there's so many issues here, and I just wish, you know, one politician, just one, would actually stick their head above the parapet and say this is one of the key issues we need to tackle in society.
And it's tricky, isn't it? Because, you know, Sarah Champion did that, didn't she? And that didn't end particularly well for her. She was kind of silenced a lot by her own party. And that was bad. I think when it comes to things like police resources, look, I absolutely understand that, you know, especially when you've got to conduct a huge, wide-scale investigation, yeah, fine. But then that argument is undermined somewhat by, you know, the bloke in Telford who flashed a police camera and 6 officers came and nailed him to his own garden within minutes, right? I mean, that was also... Telford is the area that has to date the UK's largest ever grooming gang scandal. I think, whilst I understand those are two separate things, I think the public as a whole might find it quite surprising that they had the resources to send that many officers around to a terminally ill man's house, but were unable, apparently, to get to grips with the largest ever grooming gang that the UK's ever seen. I think people might find that a bit strange, but lots of people getting in touch on this particular issue. People saying that, you know, it's good that we're obviously raising about this, and I think it's quite good as a channel here, and hats off to Kevin Larkin as well, who's our Yorkshire reporter, who's really not letting this story drop that's happening over there, and, you know, it's good that he's doing that. Yeah, and loads. We'll go through some of your go through some of your comments in a bit, but how can police have sufficient resources to deal with some crimes but not deal with grooming gangs? That's from Jeff, kind of echoing a point we were making there.
Yes, indeed. And sticking with law and order, after the break, the government has backed the Harper's Law campaign, which is calling for mandatory life sentences for those who kill a police officer or emergency worker whilst committing another crime. Well, why has this taken so long? We'll be getting to the bottom of it after the break.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Now, a campaign to give mandatory life sentences to those who kill emergency service workers whilst committing another crime, even if they didn't intend to, has been backed by the government after what Justice Secretary Dominic Raab calls a remarkable 2 years of campaigning by the widow of PC Andrew Harper.
So PC Harper was just 28 years old when he was dragged to his death by a getaway car in August 2019. 3 teenagers were jailed for manslaughter, receiving between 13 and 16 years for their crimes. Lizzie Harper married PC Harper just 4 weeks before he was killed, and has since campaigned tirelessly to introduce mandatory life sentences for those who kill on-duty emergency workers while committing another crime.
Yes, so Lizzie says Harper's law will provide extra protection to emergency service workers and that her late husband would be proud to finally see it passed. Well, let's talk to Joshua Rosenberg, a leading solicitor and one of Britain's most experienced legal commentators, who also sits on the board of the Law Commission. Thank you for joining us this morning. You've written this morning, actually, on the details of Harper's law on your law blog, and you're keen to stress that even though this is a shift in the law, it doesn't necessarily mean that people who are convicted of killing emergency service workers in another crime will actually get life imprisonment, let alone, obviously, that whole life order. Can you just explain to us a bit about this?
Yes, you know that it's already possible, of course, for somebody convicted of manslaughter, as these three young men were, to receive a life sentence. It's quite unusual because the law draws a distinction between murder, deliberate killing if you like, and manslaughter, which falls short of murder. The sentence for murder is always life imprisonment. The sentence for manslaughter may be life imprisonment, or it may be a fixed term of years. It's even more complicated because in some cases, a very few, small number of cases, if you're convicted of murder and you have to get a life sentence, that may mean you get what's called a whole life order. A whole life order means that you won't be released from prison. You're expected to die in jail. That's very unusual. And so what the government seems to be saying is that there will be a mandatory sentence, but if you look more closely, the mandatory sentence for manslaughter isn't mandatory at all, because what it says is that it will be mandatory unless there are truly exceptional circumstances. And when the government is asked what's meant by truly exceptional circumstances, it says judges will have the option to impose a different sentence in exceptional circumstances, if there are exceptional circumstances which relate to the offender or the offence, which would make it unjust to apply the minimum sentence. So although there will be the possibility of somebody being sent to prison for the whole of their life if they're convicted of manslaughter rather than murder, I think it's very unlikely that there's going to be any significant change in the sentences that most people will serve.
And that will come as a disappointment, I suppose, to some. But obviously the justice system is very complicated and lawyers are there to do their job. But just talk us through about what are potentially some of the things that could be considered exceptional circumstances. We know these three who were convicted of this were very young. I think they're 18 and 19. Could that be seen as a mitigating factor? Or, you know, what kind of things are we talking here that could mean they don't actually end up receiving a mandatory sentence?
Well, we don't really know. We'll have to wait and look at the legislation, which has not yet been published. But even when we get the legislation, we may not be completely sure, because it may be a matter for the courts to work it out in individual circumstances. If you're asking the difference between murder and manslaughter, and that, of course, was very significant in this case, the reason that these young men were convicted of manslaughter is that the jury were not sure that the guy who drove the getaway vehicle, Henry Long, knew that he was dragging a human body behind the car. He had these other two men, Albert Bowers and Jesse Cole, as passengers, and it wasn't clear that they had intended to kill PC Andrew Harper. That's why they were convicted by the jury of manslaughter. As you say, Long got 16 years. Actually, it's a 19-year extended determinate sentence, 16 years in custody unless the parole board releases him at 2/3 of his sentence, and an additional 3 years on extended license. So a pretty hefty sentence. That's the reason why he was convicted of manslaughter rather than murder. If you ask why there is a distinction between murder and manslaughter, it's because the courts have said that there are certain killings which are less serious than others. We call those manslaughter. And in those circumstances, it's not necessary to send somebody to prison for the whole of their life, and certainly not necessary to make this whole life order, which means that in principle they'll never be released.
This will actually make much of a practical difference, though. I understand it's a very symbolic situation, and you know, it could, in some cases anyway, in theory, actually impose a stricter punishment. But in reality, I think you just alluded to it there, you know, if someone's fleeing a crime or doing something like that, you know, more often than not, I would have thought it would probably be an accidental killing of a police officer, a bit like what we potentially saw with Harper. Well, do you think that realistically this is going to actually lead to people with, you know, with loads of life sentences, or do you think there's going to be a lot of leniency involved?
It may lead to people being given life sentences, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to spend any longer in prison. As I've explained, most people who get a life sentence are released after a period of time. It's much longer than people think. It may be 15 years, it may be 30 years, it may even be 40 years, but most of them have the prospect of release. If you think about it, that does make it a bit easier to run the prisons, because if somebody is told you're never going to be released, even if you kill another prisoner while you're in prison, even if you kill a prison officer while you're in prison, even if you kill several prison officers while you're in prison, it does make it quite difficult to manage those prisoners. Now, of course, there are some very, very serious offenders who are told this, and that's entirely right. But the courts are reluctant to extend that to killings which are less serious. It's very difficult for judges to decide where to put a killing on the scale of seriousness. People have different views, things change. Different defences reduce murder to manslaughter. But I don't think that this is going to mean that somebody in the position of these three young men would be sent to prison for the whole of their lives. They would get a life sentence with a minimum term, which would mean that they would spend maybe a bit more, maybe not, but certainly a period of time in prison before they're released.
Look, thank you very much for imparting your wisdom on this particular topic, Joshua. Joshua Rosenberg there, leading solicitor and one of Britain's most experienced legal commentators, just picking us through that Harper's Law, which I think, you know, I suppose it is maybe more symbolic than practical, but it's needed.
It is.
Though.
It's symbolic, and even then, even if it leads to just a small proportion of the people who commit these kinds of crimes getting a harsher sentence, I think surely it's worth it. So obviously it's so difficult to get huge changes in laws that are dramatic changes. But I think this is a great step forward in getting more justice.
I'm a bit conflicted. Look, I'm all for tough justice, obviously, but I'm a bit conflicted about it, because if someone is committing a crime, right, and they're fleeing that crime or whatever, and in the course of doing that they do kill a police officer or an emergency services worker, the chances are that, like I said before, that they've probably not done that necessarily deliberately, and therefore this is not a deterrent, is it? Because at no point will they think, oh, well, I better not accidentally kill this police officer because I might get life in prison, because they didn't intend to do it in the first place a lot of the time, did they?
Well, no, you're right, and I suppose that's what the change in the law is. It's for people who didn't, even if you don't intend, because then they'd be charged for murder. So it's even if they don't mean, when they don't mean to kill the police officer, now the judges are being given the option to give this this life sentence. But I suppose it's up to the courts, isn't it, to look at the particular circumstances, because, you know, dragging a man, I know there's a question of whether they knew he was attached to the car or not, but, you know, they were trying to flee, I don't know what they were fleeing, I can't remember the details, but they were fleeing from the police, and they were dragging him. I think, you know, it all depends on the details whether judges would be likely to sort of impose a man. But I think it's good that that's being given to them as an option at the very least, because there are cases, I think, where a policeman's died and it might not have been deliberate when somebody's been committing a crime, but that there will be a very strong case for them to get that mandatory life sentence.
No, I agree, and it is actually fundamentally about time that we stood up more for our emergency service workers. I think they get hung out to dry all too often in this country, and actually this could be something that is, you know, symbolic to them and will mean a lot to them. GBViews, gbnews.uk. There's a lot of views coming in about my comments earlier about grooming gangs and the fact that they are kind of everywhere around the country, and that there may potentially be another one up in Hull. Now, we're going to get to those. I just want to make sure that I do justice to some of your wonderful comments. So I'll be picking through those, and we'll return to them shortly.
Yes, we'll return to them after this short break and the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, good morning. Some frost and fog about this morning, especially across southern parts of the UK. Otherwise, a lot of cloud cover and An area of rain is moving south. Now, that rain associated with this cold front will bring about a change in the weather as it pushes south across the UK, but it spends most of the day moving its way south, so some early rain for parts of central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. That rain then moves eventually into northern England and North Wales by the end of the morning. Brighter skies follow for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some sunny spells, but a cold wind from the north will bring rattle of showers across northern and western Scotland, Northern Ireland as well, and it's cold enough for these to be falling as snow over the Scottish higher ground. After any mist and fog clears in the south, a lot of cloud cover, I think, for many through the rest of the day. This weather front essentially divides things north to south, with the cloudier skies in the south being eventually cleared away by the spell of rain. The rain on and off, I think, as it pushes south. Nothing particularly heavy or persistent as it moves into southern parts of the UK during the evening and the early hours of tomorrow. And for most, with the clearing skies behind the weather front, well, it'll be a chilly start to Thursday, a touch of frost in places. Enough of a breeze around coasts and across the far north to prevent a widespread frost. Further showers coming in here as well. But actually, once this cloud gets out of the way, for many it's a blue skies day. It's plenty of crisp late autumn sunshine. A bit more cloud coming into central and eastern parts of the UK by the afternoon. But for many it's looking dry. Around coasts there will still be further showers, especially in the north and down through West Wales into Cornwall. Then the weather turns much more unsettled through Friday and into the weekend. There'll be very strong winds, a yellow warning in force for Friday and Saturday for many parts, and it will turn colder as well.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning, you're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys and Mercy Muroki, and we're here all the way through until midday discussing everything from Prince William sharing concerns about population growth to where's been voted Britain's happiest place to live. That's it. We actually want you to get in touch with us on that one, don't we?
Yes, and make sure you do get in touch on our email there on the screen, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we'll be reading those out throughout the programme, of course. But first, let's give you the latest news.
Good morning, I'm Paul Hawkins. Our top story at 10, Harper's Law, a new piece of legislation which, when passed, will mean anyone who kills an emergency service worker while that worker is on duty will face a mandatory life sentence. The government wants to change the law following a 2-year campaign by Lizzie Harper, whose husband, PC Andrew Harper, was killed while answering a late-night burglary call. He died from his injuries after getting caught in a strap attached to the back of a car and was subsequently dragged down a country road. 3 teenagers were cleared of murder but convicted of manslaughter. His widow says the new law will help protect workers on the front line. Labour is calling for pop-up clinics and community pharmacies to help roll out the COVID vaccine to 1.8 million young people who are still waiting for the jab. World Health Organisations warned that a further 700,000 people could die from COVID across Europe by March. That would take the total number of deaths in Europe to more than 2.2 million. But Shadow Education Secretary Kate Green has accused the government of being complacent.
The Delta variant and the COVID virus is spreading rapidly. Young people are out of school. Many people are having to self-isolate. That's having an impact on business and families. We need to take every possible precautionary measure, not sit back complacently and say things are fine, when really there is still very considerable risk and very considerable spread of the virus.
Some news that's broken in the past half an hour. A French court has found one of the world's top footballers, France and Real Madrid forward Karim Benzema, guilty of trying to help blackmail a former international teammate. The 33-year-old has been given a 1-year suspended jail term in order to pay a fine equivalent to £63,000. Prosecutors argued that he encouraged Mathieu Valbuena to pay a suspected group of blackmailers in order to keep a sex tape out of the public eye. Benzema wasn't in court but denies any wrongdoing and says he will appeal the verdict. NASA has launched a spacecraft to try and crash into an asteroid in a bid to change its course.
3, 2, 1. And liftoff.
Don't worry, the target isn't a threat, but scientists hope if it's successful, they'll learn things which will help them stop hazardous asteroids in the future. The collision is looking to change the speed of the asteroid and therefore change its trajectory. The spacecraft is due to meet the asteroid next September. An 8-year-old boy has become the 6th person to die following that incident in the United States when an SUV drove into a Christmas parade in Wisconsin. He's the only child so far to have died in that incident. Darrell Brooks Jr. has been charged with 5 counts of first-degree intentional homicide. 62 people were also injured. Police have ruled out terrorism as a motive. The Home Office should be stripped of responsibility for the Windrush compensation scheme. That's according to a cross-party group of MPs. The Home Affairs Committee found what it says were a litany of flaws in the way Priti Patel's department operates. It's recommended the scheme be transferred to an independent organisation to increase trust. As of the end of September, only 20% of the estimated 15,000 eligible claimants had applied, with only 5% receiving any compensation. And New Zealand has announced it's relaxing its strict border policies. Displaced residents will be able to return home from January, while tourists will be allowed in from April. Currently, returning residents have to spend 2 weeks in a quarantine hotel run by the military. The country has reported 40 deaths since the start of the pandemic.
So amazing, again, like for New Zealand and for the economy, and yeah, it'd be pretty cool for Kiwis to get back overseas.
I think it's exciting for everyone. We've got lots of family and friends who have family abroad, and this is a really special time.
Even for work purposes as well, it just makes life so much easier.
I don't necessarily think it's a great idea. There's a lot of pressure from businesses and people like that want to keep their economy running, and that's really what I think is the main push. And I don't blame them. I know they've been losing a lot of money, and some businesses have closed altogether.
You're up to date with the latest. We'll have more for you in half an hour.
Good morning, everyone. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys and Mercy Muroki. And we've got a show full of all of today's biggest stories and loads of discussion topics as well to get you going. Here's what's coming up.
Yes, as we come out of the pandemic, our tax burden is higher than it has been for a very long time. Should we start lowering taxes immediately? Well, we'll be discussing that very shortly.
We will indeed. Now, people in Northern Ireland are being urged by Stormont ministers to work from home if possible to curb the spread of coronavirus. Is this the start of wider restrictions?
Prince William has highlighted how the increasing impact human population is having on Africa's wildlife. This comes as he's expecting his third child. We'll be looking at the impact of huge population growth.
Yes, we will. We have all of that coming up and much, much more across the programme, and you can get in touch as well with your views. As usual, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, Mercy gives her views on the new Harper's Law.
Now, it's rare that I talk about the criminal justice system, that it involves good news. But this morning, the news that the mandatory life sentences for people who kill emergency service workers, even if accidentally whilst committing another crime, could be handed down life sentences is a rare bit of good news that we all need. After a 2-year campaign by the brave widow of PC Andrew Harper, who was mercilessly dragged to death by a car of feral thugs while responding to a 999 call, justice has prevailed. The 3 cowards convicted received meagre sentences of 16 years and 13 years. They smirked their way through the whole ordeal, even boasting that they didn't care as they were getting arrested, and have shown absolutely no remorse since. Now, as tragic as the circumstances that have led to Harper's Law making its way onto the statute books are, the law change is music to my ears, and in fact, the best news to come out of criminal justice since PC Wayne Couzens was handed down a whole life term 2 months ago for the kidnap, rape and murder of Sarah Everard. And I hope this trajectory of giving criminals exactly what they deserve continues. For all of this Conservative government's failings, and quite frankly there are too many to name, at least they're not being a complete failure on their promise to be the party of law and order. The Police Sentencing and Crime Bill, which should become law early next year, is the tough on crime approach I want to see from a Conservative government. For instance, it makes the starting point for sentencing child murderers a whole life order, so life will mean life for more of these irredeemable monsters. It also changes the point at which offenders are eligible for release for some sexual and violent offenders from halfway through their sentence to 2/3 of the way through their sentence. Better, but still too lenient in my view. The point is, polls repeatedly show that the British public want the law to be firm but fair, and it currently isn't. Judges hand down pathetic sentences, murderous convicts are let loose onto our streets too soon, and it too often seems the rights of offenders are put before the rights of their victims. So I very much welcome Harper's Law and any other law that delivers real justice rather than the second-rate Poundland justice our courts currently deliver. And I commend and salute Lizzie Harper, PC Harper's widow, for her strength and courage in taking on the unfairness of the justice system.
Yeah, it was good stuff. I mean, I think, again, I think hats off to the wife, really, because, she's obviously campaigned tirelessly, or understandably feels very passionate about it, you can imagine. But I think it is also a sign to others now. She's not just got justice or potentially anyway paved the way for justice for people who go on and commit crimes like that as well. But I think she's shown something bigger than that. I think she's shown that actually, if you really campaign for something and if you really commit to something, you too might be able to get a change in the law as well.
Absolutely, and I believe the petition she made to get this law changed, I think it received something like 750,000 signatures or something like that, nearly 1 million probably. So it does very much show what one person can do if they want to. And this law is coming into effect as an amendment in the Police, Crime and Sentencing Bill, which the government's pushing through Parliament, due to hopefully receive royal assent next year. And the Conservatives always say we're the party of law and order, we're the party of law and order. And I think this bill is actually a chance for them to prove that, because as I mentioned there, it does have a range of measures in it which are what some would say delivering real justice for people who do commit the worst kinds of crimes in society, not least increasing or giving judges the option to hand down whole life orders to a wider range of people who deserve it, and sort of stopping the kind of getting out halfway through your sentence thing. I still think even that, the fact some people get out of jail pretty much with their whole life ahead of them when they've committed the worst of crimes, it still sits very uncomfortably with me. But I think this is a really good first step in terms of providing real justice for people who deserve it.
Absolutely. Well, we're just going to delve into the inbox quickly now. We'll wait for the views, no doubt, to come in thick and fast as a result of Mercy's monologue, but there's a few in there, as you can imagine, after I spoke earlier on about my opinions on grooming gangs, basically, and what we're not doing to tackle them, essentially. Sadly, this issue is a reflection of the systemic failures of nearly all our public institutions, according to Barbara. We need a root and branch reform, and it's hard to disagree with that, I suppose. Patrick, please acknowledge that, actually, amongst these grooming gangs, there are elements of racism as well. And I think that's a really important point, Richard, actually, because people, you know, I made the point that I was concerned that potentially some members of our police force or some members of our political community might be scared, really, of, as they would say, you know, stoking racial tensions potentially if they come out and outline maybe the full scale of the problem. I would argue that there's already racism involved there. I would argue that a lot of the time I think there's a lot of very young, vulnerable white girls are targeted, I suspect, because they're viewed as maybe being lesser than, I think, and that's racism, right? So it's already there in my views. But anyway, there we go.
Yes, keep your views coming in. But moving on to something a bit lighter than what we've been speaking about this morning.
Oh, yes.
Do you want to give the news, the good news?
To the fair people of Hexham?
Exactly, yeah.
Yes. Hexham in Northumberland has been named Britain's happiest place to live. Well done, everyone in Hexham.
Yes, the Happy at Home Index, now in its 10th year, asked more than 21,000 people across Britain how they feel about where they live, and the market town also came out on top, actually, in 2019.
Fantastic. Well, you know what? We've gone right to the very top on this, ladies and gentlemen. Guy Opperman is the Member of Parliament for Hexham. He is a very happy man, absolutely. There we are. He's represented the area for over 10 years and Minister in the Department for Work and Pensions. Well, what makes it so happy?
Well, 2 times in 3 years, knocking it out of the park. We're doing very, very well. You need to come and see. That's the most important message that I want to try and get out there, is that get out of Paddington, get out of London, come and see the amazingness that is Hexham and the surrounding countryside. I suppose there's a whole bunch of things. There's an amazing sense of community. You've got culture, you've got walking, you've got the opportunity to see Hadrian's Wall, the World Heritage Site, literally on your doorstep. You've got some of the best gastropubs in the country at the Rat at Ainic, or you've got amazing independent bookshops that are completely knocking it out of the park, whether it is Cogito or Forum, both nominated for awards over the last couple of years. You've got really quality shops there, and you've got a wider community that really supports it, that is a mix between home living in a small community of just over about 10,000 people, but also surrounded by beautiful countryside, you know, Northumberland National Park, you've got the River Tyne on your doorstep, and you've got access to the city and the bright lights of Newcastle and Carlisle down the road.
What's not to like?
What's not to like? Exactly the point. I think the serious point that we want to try and make, though, is that we want people to come and visit. And we want to try and showcase the fact that Hexham, 2 times in the last 3 years, has been the happiest and best place to visit, frankly, in the world, let alone the UK.
Oh, I tell you what, you know, this is what you want from your local MP, isn't it? Banging the drum.
Yes. So the happiness measures apparently include things like friendliness, community spirit, but they also include opportunities to develop skills, you know, good schools, that kind of thing, nature and green scenery, etc. The government has obviously been talking a lot about levelling up since they were elected in 2019, and the reality is there are so many places that don't have these things that have led Hexham to be voted the happiest place to live. Is the government planning on actually delivering levelling up? And will places in the north who have high levels of deprivation see any of these sorts of positives that Hexham enjoys, clearly?
So let me answer that head on. First of all, if you want to see an actual 2-minute video of exactly what levelling up looks like in Hexham, go to my pinned tweet on my Twitter profile, and you will see me trying to explain what we have done to transform this community. So I have 4 high schools. All of them have been rebuilt or improved over the last 10 years. The last one was just recently reopened after a rebuild after 35 million plus investment in Hexham Queen Elizabeth High School, award-winning school. So there is work done there already. You also see, obviously, improved connectivity, hospital services, old hospitals in places like Hawkwhistle that would have been knocked down or turned into flats. We've turned into a very modern, integrated GP and locally led NHS facility. We're trying to do things very differently there. And if there is a role model for levelling up, I would suggest Hexham over the last 10 years is exactly that. whether it is in the improvement in schools, I've mentioned the 4 high schools being rebuilt, whether it is the way that healthcare is now done in a very, very different way by Northumbria NHS Trust, who are very much the leaders in the country, or whether it is the way in which business is tackling things. Ego is the biggest local community employer, employs over 600 people. I opened an apprenticeship academy there. They are doing retraining. We've just had a UTC open nearby. There is things done in a very, very different way, which I suggest is a role model for the wider part of the UK. So it is true we need to do more levelling up across the UK, and I think the Prime Minister is utterly committed to that. But if you want an example of where it's been successful over the last 10 years, go to Hexham.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Hopefully other areas in the UK can replicate that, I suppose. I've just been having whilst I was obviously listening to every word you were saying, I was also checking things to do in Hexham. There's the Museum of Classic Sci-Fi, apparently. There's
in Allendale, yes.
There's an alpaca encounter. I think there's fantastic stuff. There's also the Roman Army Museum for the culture vultures. But I want to know what your favourite thing to do in Hexham is.
In Hexham itself, it's a stroll around the town. Because you have, in the heart of Hexham, which is very unique to the way in which this is done, you have Hexham Abbey, and you have a whole bunch of independent shops, and you have an opportunity to experience culture, shopping, entertainment, and community spirit all in one. There are wider things. So you mentioned the amazing Doctor Who, Allendale Sci-Fi museum, which is incredible and has won awards as well, and the man who runs it is an amazing bloke. Or you know, if you want Roman history, you go to Corbridge, you go to Vindolanda, where the Vindolanda tablets and various other things are there from both the British Museum and on Vindolanda site. There is amazing sense of culture, history. The community has been there for literally thousands of years. It's taken in the Romans and everyone beyond. Next year in 2022, we have the Hadrian's Wall celebration of the 1900th anniversary of Hadrian's Wall. Massive celebration of one of the great World UNESCO sites that is Hadrian's Wall. Opportunity for not just Rachel to get out and about and show us the wonders of Hadrian's Wall, but for all of you to do a live broadcast
from the wall.
From the wall.
From the wall. We could do that, you know.
It would be very cool, wouldn't it?
Oh, it would actually. Yes, it might be a bit nippy, but we'll do it. We'll do it.
You can come in the summer. The days are very long. You're in the middle of Northumberland National Park, the greatest national park that there is, and you have an opportunity to broadcast not just to. I mean, you can see 20 miles to Scotland comfortably. You can see 20 miles to Cumbria and Durham. We have, big sky views. I always call it England's Montana. It is amazing.
Well, there you go. Sold, I think. Sold for me personally on that one. But you've got a list here of some of the other happy places, haven't you?
So the other, there's 10, these are the 10 happiest places.
The North is doing well, you know.
Hexham, obviously, in the North East, we've spoken about that. Richmond upon Thames, London comes in a close second. Funnily enough, none of these, I'm not surprised, feature London very much. So, what's the contrast between somewhere like Hexham, where you get to enjoy, because I'm a country person, I'm not really a city girl, and I love all of that and experiencing the outdoors. There's the reason why the only place in London on the top 10 is Richmond upon Thames, because that's what people enjoy. And there's a reality that, cities are quite miserable, aren't they? And actually, we should be encouraging people, if they want to be happier, to perhaps go somewhere where it's more pleasant, there's more outdoors.
Well, I think you're right, but more particularly, it's a sense of community, isn't it? It's a sense of place, of time, of having an understanding of what it is the community you represent and the wider community, whether that is the culture and the history of the place, and having the opportunity of the space, as you mentioned, the green outdoors. You can literally go within a mile and you are in amazing countryside. You can cycle onto Hadrian's Wall within literally 10 or 15 minutes. You have the capacity to feel a sense of place and time, the time to live that isn't necessarily there in cities.
Is there an opportunity here? The work from home, it was enforced upon us for a while, but I mean, it's just stuck a bit, hasn't it? And isn't this now an opportunity potentially for places like Hexham or indeed Harrogate, Hove? I'm not going to pronounce the Welsh one, where actually people can now work from home, and these now are places where you don't need to go in a city, do you?
It's already happening. So I have businesses literally a walking distance from the centre of Hexham who would have been based in London, M25, maybe Birmingham or Manchester as of 10 years ago. And those businesses, provided you've got decent broadband, have the capacity to function and do seriously complex. I've got some computer-generated engineering businesses. I've got some stress testing of offshore oil platforms and wind farms. These are very techie businesses, based in Hexham, where people have a great place to live, got fantastic local schools, and people are beginning to work in different places. And there is the connectivity. Of course, it should be improved, but the connectivity is sufficient that these people are able to come to London once every 2 weeks, or go on the road, or go and do international travel on an ongoing basis. That is the future, without a shadow of a doubt. And you talk about the north-south divide. You talk about the difference of the economy of central London and the M25 as compared to rural areas. Improved broadband and the capacity to work from home wherever you are is the way ahead. And that will do more for levelling up than almost anything else.
Well, there you go. Well, Guy, thank you very much. And I suppose next time I see you, we'll be sat on Hadrian's Wall.
I look forward to it. Summer next year, I wouldn't recommend it in the winter because it is quite snowy. But summer next year, look forward to seeing you there.
Good stuff. Thank you very much for coming in. It's great stuff. That Happy Hexham. There you go, everybody.
Yes, now after the break, we'll be talking about the historically high tax burden and asking if rates should be cut. Don't miss it. But first, let's give you the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, good morning. Some frost and fog about this morning, especially across southern parts of the UK. Otherwise, a lot of cloud cover. And an area of rain is moving south. Now, that rain associated with this cold front will bring about a change in the weather as it pushes south across the UK, but it spends most of the day moving its way south. So some early rain for parts of central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. That rain then moves eventually into northern England and North Wales by the end of the morning. Brighter skies follow for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some sunny spells, but a cold wind from the north will bring rattle of showers across northern and western Scotland, Northern Ireland as well, and it's cold enough for these to be falling as snow over the Scottish higher ground. After any mist and fog clears in the south, a lot of cloud cover, I think, for many through the rest of the day. This weather front essentially divides things north to south, with the cloudier skies in the south being eventually cleared away by the spell of rain. The rain on and off, I think, as it pushes south. Nothing particularly heavy or persistent as it moves into southern parts of the UK during the evening and the early hours of tomorrow. And for most, with the clearing skies behind the weather front, well, it'll be a chilly start to Thursday, a touch of frost in places. Enough of a breeze around coasts and across the far north to prevent a widespread frost. Further showers coming in here as well. But actually, once this cloud gets out of the way, for many it's a blue skies day. It's plenty of crisp late autumn sunshine. A bit more cloud coming into central and eastern parts of the UK by the afternoon. But for many it's looking dry. Around coasts there will still be further showers, especially in the north and down through West Wales into Cornwall. Then the weather turns much more unsettled through Friday and into the weekend. There'll be very strong winds, a yellow warning in force for Friday and Saturday for many parts, and it will turn colder as well.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you very much, everyone who's been tuning in and indeed emailing in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Just a little teaser. Hopefully very soon, anyway, we're going to be going to our Home Security editor, Mark White, who is currently in the channel. And he's actually, I've just had a little sneak preview of what's coming up. He's actually next to a migrant boat that's coming in now. So we'll hopefully go to him shortly, really. But let's get stuck into the inbox for now. Lots of you getting in touch about Hexham. Being the happiest place to live. People seem to think it is indeed a very happy place. It turns out we're big in Hexham.
Yeah, I've never been there. I'm not going to lie to you, but it does sound very pleasant. It sounds like my kind of place. People are always quite shocked when I say I'm not a city girl. I feel like people our generation are expected to like cities more than sort of rural areas. Yeah.
I just love rural areas. I'm from near Cheshire anyway, and as soon as I get off the train there, the first thing I do is take a big deep breath in, and it doesn't smell like smog like it does in the south. So lots of reaction to what I was talking before about grooming gangs. It looks as though there may indeed be a similar situation taking place in Hull. Indeed, it is taking place, in my opinion, in every major town and city across the country. I was asking why police aren't doing more to clamp down on it. The police have become too PC, if you'll excuse the pun, and are too frightened of upsetting people. And that's from Nicola, and I'm inclined to agree with you, Nicola. It just seems like there's inaction. In case you missed it, there's a loophole basically taking place at the moment where police forces apparently aren't sharing information with other police forces. So if you are trafficking a child from one part of the country to another and you are known by a police force to be a part of a grooming gang and that child's known to be vulnerable, if you're stopped in a different area, then that police force has got no way of checking who you are. I mean, if you cared about the problem, you'd just close that loophole.
Yeah, no, I think it's resources really more than anything, and just probably, poor technology. The whole thing needs looking at. It needs better funding, as does sort of everything in this life, in this country. It does need more funding, and it just needs better coordination between them.
Yes, indeed. There's also been quite a bit of reaction to your monologue on Harper's Law, which is this new law coming in, essentially, that may lead to criminals who kill emergency service workers during the course of committing another crime. They may now get life sentences. Guna has been in touch. Thank you very much. Guess what football team you support? As tragic and cold as the killing of PC Harper was, we must not lose sight of the fact that all people are equal under the law. So basically, I think they're alluding to the idea that, just because they're emergency service workers, I think it's more of a protection for those emergency service workers.
Of course all people are equal under the law, but there are, I think, severity. I think there's a moral difference between killing, for example, a child and killing an adult. I really do think that. So I do think that it shows the depravity of somebody in particular if they're willing to kill a child, for example, which is why I think actually we should have tougher sentences for people who do that to children. So I completely understand the point, but I think we're not saying that people aren't equal. We're just saying that there are particularly depraved crimes that I would suggest.
Yes, and just returning to Great Britain and the happiest places in it. Hexham obviously is supposedly the happiest place to live. We've got Richmond upon Thames as well, leafy. Harrogate in Yorkshire, a few other ones as well, and one place in Wales that I cannot pronounce. But we've just had Guy Opperman on, of course, MP for Hexham, and Zach's been in touch, and I think he hit on a really good point. He says Guy Opperman is spot on. Outside London, you get that friendly community spirit that I absolutely love. And you really do, don't you? And that's part of it. I am worried in this country that I think we're losing community.
Yeah, no, in a way, I think in London, most people don't know their neighbours. There's a high churn rate, isn't there, of for people, because a lot of people don't own their homes. They can't afford to own their homes. I think 1.2 million or something is the average price in London. And so most people are renting, and most renters are moving. You get new people coming in, moving next door all the time. There's so many people. I mean, it is very hard to foster a sense of community. But I do think that I always find there to be a really strong sense of community amongst communities with where people own their council houses or have lived in their council houses for a long, long time. I have always found sort of council estates almost have a much higher sense of community than most other types of places, really.
No, I agree completely. And I think that it is a shame, actually. And I think if you don't have that sense of community, you feel transient, you tend to treat the place with less respect, you potentially treat each other with less respect, and it just feels a bit soulless, doesn't it? Unlike Hexham, which has got a big beating heart. But anyway, moving on. A lottery-winning Brit has less than a week left to claim their prize. I'm just going to check now, actually. So the Londoner, I'm in the game, won £1 million in the Euro Millions lottery back in June, but is still yet to come forward and claim it.
Yes, and there's somebody picking up a lottery ticket next Sunday on November 28th. The individual will miss their chance forever. They won't ever get it back if they don't claim it by November the 28th. But there is good news, I suppose, in all of this. If they don't claim it by that date, the sum will be donated to national lottery projects in the UK. So it'll be donated to charity. And bosses at the operator of the UK National Lottery, Camelot, are now urging anyone who bought a ticket in Greenwich, London for the first draw to search behind sofas, coat pockets, where maybe they've put it in the bin as well, so in which case they'll never find out. 4 days left to claim now.
You'd be if I found out that I'd won £1 million on the lottery and didn't claim it, I think I'd just walk into the sea.
Yeah, there is a way to avoid this. Given some tips.
Personal.
No, well, no, not even that. You can buy lottery tickets online.
Yes.
And that is the only way to actually avoid losing a lottery ticket that could turn out to be a winning lottery ticket, because when you buy one online, then they email you, you always have that record, you can go back and check anytime you want, you don't have to go around searching for where the hell you put it. So, to be honest, that might be the things to do if you don't want to...
There was... a fantastic story, right, which I've just rediscovered now, which is of a Spanish TV reporter, right, and they were on air, and they got a message to say that they'd won the lottery, right, and she quit live on air. She just threw the microphone down. She was like, "That's it, I'm done, I'm out of here, I don't need you lot anymore, you can shove your job." And then she got outside and realised that she'd won about €10. And so she had to come back and beg for her job back. I think that was fantastic. What would you do if you won £1 million on the lottery?
As in, what would I do with the money, or what would I do live on air?
No. What would you do with the money?
Well, I do that classic thing, you know, that everybody says, well, of our age, buy a house.
Would you?
Yeah.
I think I'd just be dead in a week.
Yeah, I would. That doesn't surprise me at all.
No, well, there we go. Well, I'll tell you what, why don't you let us know what you do with the money?
Yeah, you know, I hate when people say, "Oh, I'd give so much of it to charity," but would you really? Would you?
Well, after I'd sunk most of it, I suppose. But anyway, right, well, yeah, so if you have an unclaimed lottery ticket and if you're in Greenwich, you know, check, basically.
And
check.
apparently the winning code is ZMFD00211. So that's the code you should be looking out for if your lottery ticket has that code and you bought it in Greenwich.
Well, there you go.
London.
Don't miss out, people, otherwise the money will go to charity, which is obviously good news for charity, but... You'd want the money, wouldn't you? Anyway. Right, we are, I believe now, going to go to the news, I think. So make sure you stay tuned. We've got loads coming up after the break. Prince William has suggested that human population growth on the African continent is posing a danger to wildlife. We're also going to be talking to our social affairs editor, Inaya Falarin Iman, who's going to be discussing all of that with us. But before that, it's the morning's news.
Good morning, I'm Paul Hawkins. Your top stories at 10:30. Then anyone who kills an emergency service worker while that worker is on duty will face a mandatory life sentence under a new piece of legislation called Harper's Law. The change follows a 2-year campaign by Lizzie Harper, whose husband, PC Andrew Harper, was killed while answering a late-night burglary call. 3 teenagers were convicted of manslaughter. His widow says the new law will help protect workers on the front line. Labour is calling for pop-up clinics and community pharmacies to help roll out the COVID vaccine to 1.8 million young people still waiting for the jab. The World Health Organisation's warned that a further 700,000 people could die from COVID across Europe by March. That would take the total number of deaths in Europe to more than 2.2 million. Changes to universal credits, including a £500 increase to the work allowance, are being rolled out today, a week early. For every £1 earned, a claimant will now have to pay back 8p less. The government estimates 2 million people could be £1,000 better off a year. But the independent think tank, the Resolution Foundation, says people out of work won't benefit. Women at a higher risk of miscarriage are to be offered a hormone drug to prevent pregnancy loss. The National Institute for Health and Care Excellence says women who previously had a miscarriage and bleeding in early pregnancy can be offered progesterone. The baby loss charity Tommy's reckoned giving out the drug could prevent nearly 8,500 miscarriages each year. And New Zealand is relaxing its strict border policies. It's letting in displaced residents from January and tourists from April. Currently, returning residents have to spend 2 weeks in a quarantine hotel. You're up to date with the latest. We'll have more for you at 11.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Yes, morning everybody. Now, Prince William has suggested that an increase in human population on the African continent poses a danger to wildlife. Earlier this week, he told the Tusk Conservation Awards in London, Africa remains on the front line of conservation, playing host to the most awe-inspiring diversity of flora and fauna.
Yes, it's the second time Prince William has raised the issue of population growth at the awards ceremony, having first referenced it in his 2017 speech and coming under fire because he was at the time expecting his third child. Well, Inaya Falarin Iman is our culture and social affairs editor and joins us this morning to discuss this. Inaya, what has Prince William actually said here? He's not saying it's necessarily a bad thing that there's this population growth. He's just saying it's related to the environmental damage that is happening across the continent.
Well, he is essentially suggesting that overpopulation is a threat to nature and wildlife. And I do find this narrative very worrying because previously, global individuals concerned about different problems on the world stage were concerned about disease and the lack of prosperity and poverty. And one of the biggest reasons why population growth in Africa is actually increasing is because increasingly people are no longer dying from infant mortality, from disease, from famine and war. And that should actually be a cause to celebrate. The expansion of human prosperity and progress is now being recast as actually something that is a threat. And the reality is also just not true. Like, for example, one child in America probably consumes the equivalent of 100 people in many parts of the developing world. one of the biggest threats to wildlife and deforestation and things like that is actually meeting the demands of consumption in the Western world. And that's actually what countries like China and India and even other developing countries, such as mining cobalt for iPhones and things like that, are actually having to do. So I think it is quite a worrying turn within the environmentalist debate, which is seeing overpopulation and the expansion of human prosperity as a threat. And just one more point on this. Actually, the reality is when we look at countries like Japan and Germany, these are developing countries. Their problem right now is not too many people, it's actually too few. They have an aging population and are therefore increasingly looking at ways in terms of a fertility policy or bringing in people from other countries to meet their demands for a productive workforce. So actually, what we see is that when countries develop, people have less kids, and that actually can even bring other economic problems in the future. So I think that narrative about overpopulation, I just don't think is accurate, and actually it's quite a worrying one.
Yeah, it is. And also, maybe he should look a bit closer to home, shouldn't he? He's got a few kids of his own. I believe, as Mercy pointed out, that his wife was actually expecting apparently this first time that he made comments like this. And let's be honest, the royal family are rather large consumers, aren't they, as well? So, maybe he's being a bit hypocritical here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that is probably quite accurate. As I mentioned, actually, people in the developing world like Britain and America consume so much more, hundreds of times more than people in India or China or other parts of Africa. And so to kind of place them as a responsibility for deforestation and wildlife and habitat destruction, I just don't think is particularly accurate. But actually, one of the things is that actually the people that are giving birth, their children, for all we know, may well be the future geniuses that come up with the kinds of solutions that we need in order to mitigate the effects of climate change, which will and likely be quite catastrophic and disastrous. So this is actually coming from someone, myself, who does actually think that we should be living a much more local, a much more frugal way of life and thinking about our impact on the planet. But I think actually somehow placing the responsibility on the developing world when they're actually trying to get out of poverty and extreme deprivation, I think is actually not the right way of looking at it.
Yeah, thank you, Inaya. And finally, you have a new show coming up here on GB News, don't you? Just tell us a bit about that, maybe?
Oh, thank you for bringing it up. Yes, this Saturday is the first episode at 6 to 7 p.m. of The Discussion, talking about many issues like this, big moral, cultural and political issues that are shaping our times. What are the shifts going on the underlying, public conversation? So make sure that you tune into that for more discussions like this.
Absolutely.
We look forward to that. I'll be definitely tuning in.
It's about time too, as well. Thank you very much, Inaya. Great to have you on the show. You're normally my Friday show buddy. We've got an extra appearance from
Now I'm posed with the massive dilemma of, do I record Strictly and watch Inaya, or watch Inaya and record
Well, I suppose if you really cared about her as a friend, then there's an obvious choice, isn't it?
Sorry, Inaya, I will actually tune in, I promise.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that was Inaya Flanagan, of course, whizzing you through what Prince William's been chunnering on about. Anyway, yesterday, Lord Frost urged the UK not to import European social model, or it would risk the failure of its split from the EU. In a speech at a conference attended by the Prime Minister himself, the Brexit Minister stated that Britain cannot carry on as it was before Brexit and must cut taxes and reduce regulation. All this comes after reports of concern about growing drift in Number 10, compounded by a chaotic speech, of course, given by Mr Johnson at the Confederation of British Industry, during which he made car noises and referenced Peppa Pig a lot. Basically, should we be cutting taxes?
Well, joining us now is Duncan Simpson, the Research Director at the Taxpayers Alliance, who has written on many areas of public policy, including, of course, government spending. Thank you for joining us this morning, Duncan. Is Lord Frost right to suggest that tax cuts are necessary to fully get the benefits of Brexit?
I think so. I mean, not merely in light of us leaving the EU and voting for that 5 years ago, but particularly the current situation. I mean, it is pretty bleak. I mean, if you look at the public finances in the round. So the debt to GDP ratio, so that's the accumulation of borrowing, which the government and many governments have done over the years. That's £2.3 trillion. That's almost as big as the economy, big as it's been since the 1960s. The overall tax burden as well. So that's taxes in relation to the size of the economy. Again, that in a few years' time is going to be at a 70-year high. So, the earliest since the 1950s, when we were, paying our war debt. So the situation is indeed pretty bleak. I mean, obviously there are very few changes announced in the budget a few weeks back. For example, there's some good things like a reduction in domestic air passenger duty. We've got one of the highest aviation taxes in the world, so that was quite encouraging to see. Likewise, business rates, the multiplier, so the gradual increase which many sort of high street retailers face, that's going to be curtailed in the coming years as well. So that's some good news on the tax front, but very limited good news on the tax front. I think, the wider problem is that the spending review committed to ramping up spending to levels which we haven't seen since the days of Callaghan and Wilson. I mean, I think in a few years' time we're looking at about 42% of GDP is going to be the state, basically. So that's a vast level. So if the government want to go hand in hand of perhaps, for example, not really changing too much on the tax front, but actually recognising that we are overspending and have been doing so for many years, that would have been good to see. But that seemingly wasn't the plan announced by the Chancellor a few weeks back.
It's all well and good, though, at the moment, saying we should, cut taxes, and of course that's what every single person wants at every given moment. They want to pay less tax, well, most people anyway. And Boris Johnson has said, once we get over this pandemic and we finish paying off for the sort of impact of it, then they want to get back to the party of being low taxes. So even if we wanted to do this, this is not the time, is it, surely?
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, the numerous pronouncements from the Prime Minister of, his standing up and saying he's a Thatcherite, and the desire is to be cutting taxes. Likewise, the Chancellor saying that as well. I mean, I would struggle to believe that at the moment. Unfortunately, for example, you've got the introduction of the health and social care levy that's coming in at the start of next financial year in April. In theory, is a temporary tax to clear the backlog for millions of people who've missed out on appointments over the last 18 months because of COVID, as well as putting some more money into the social care system, which is well known as a complete basket case, and then in theory will be got rid of. I mean, I frankly don't believe him. Obviously, income tax was introduced in the Napoleonic Wars as a temporary way to pay for this, and here we are. So yes, in theory, I mean, obviously the priority of the government is technically clearing some COVID debts and then turning to tax changes and potentially tax cuts. But I mean, there are numerous measures which we should be doing to stimulate investment. I mean, for example, business rates should be going down somewhat. You could increase the annual investment allowance. That's basically a part of the corporation tax system, which allows you to sort of purchase plant and machinery and equipment to manufacture goods and services. So it's more sort of tax efficient to do that stuff. Those are the kind of priorities which the government should have been going for a few weeks back, and certainly should be looking at again for the next budget.
Duncan, thank you very much. Duncan Simpson there, the Research Director at the Taxpayers Alliance. He's obviously written on many areas of public policy, including government spending, and that's why we got him on, basically. But, do you think that we should be paying less tax? I mean, it was the manifesto promise, wasn't it, to not increase tax?
Well, yeah, but then the pandemic hit. So things happened, didn't they? But I think it's hard to judge, or it would be probably unfair to judge the government in terms of their fiscal policy at this point in time, given the pandemic. Whether they'll be in power by the time of the next election to actually prove that they're the party of low taxes is yet to be seen, I suppose. But please, just don't make us pay so much tax, eh?
Yeah, I mean, that would be lovely, actually.
Yes, please.
This is a plea. Boris, if you're watching, please don't make me pay any more tax. Anyway, right, people in Northern Ireland are being urged by Stormont ministers to work from home where possible in a bid to curb the spread of the coronavirus in the province.
Yes, this message is to be strengthened, apparently, in the coming days following an executive meeting about how to tackle rising infections. Northern Ireland's infection rate has been climbing over the past week or so to become the highest across the UK and Ireland.
Well, our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, is in Enniskillen and earlier was asked about the state of Northern Ireland's coronavirus cases in relation to the advice to work from home.
Well, they are climbing. They're climbing quite quickly here, although the rate of deaths aren't going up in the same way. That probably has to do more with the vaccination that was very, very successfully rolled out here last year. But they are trying to get in front of it, and they're trying to anticipate what's going to happen next. Now, they don't have the same financial tools that they did have in place back at the start. There's no furlough, no bounce-back loans, no high street grants to keep everybody happy. So they have reverted to preset. They're asking those that worked from home in the first lockdown to do the same again. They're appealing to their employers to work with them. They are re-rolling out the message of hand sanitisation, wearing masks and keeping our distance. But that's causing problems, I suppose, all through it and through the economy. And they're not the only ones that are seeing problems with legislation in the economy. Yesterday, the Road Hauliers Association appeared at Stormont. They are speaking to MLAs there on the legislation that is costing them quite substantial amounts of money due to the protocol. And they feel that they are not being heard, and they fear that those costs may come on to the high street in Northern Ireland.
What we're trying to get across to the MLAs is the take on the current difficulties with the trading between GB and Northern Ireland. We're trying to explain to them the difficulties that we're experiencing and what's coming down the tracks. We see more bureaucracy, more cost, more lost time and greater stress on people that work within the sector. Well, what it was originally, there was free and unfettered trade between GB and Northern Ireland. GB is our biggest marketplace. Now with the trading restrictions through the protocol, that has slowed the logistics chain down. It's costing more money, there's more bureaucracy, and people are leaving the sector because of the increased stress. And that's even with the mitigations and the easements that's currently in place. TSS was set up by the government to help hauliers move product from GB to Northern Ireland. The government has also set up the Movement Assistance Scheme, and it's sponsored by the government, and they're looking at a digital assistance scheme. All those schemes are supported by government currently, and the cost of that isn't being borne by the sector. Whenever the government walks away from those schemes, you will see considerable increase in costs for the sector to try to buy in those services.
Well, you can see from that the Road Hauliers Association are quite upset by the whole process of not being heard. Now, they are looking for less bureaucracy and more clarity. That can be said not only for the road hauliers, but over COVID messages as well throughout the UK.
Doogie there, thank you very much. Doogie Beattie obviously reporting on that. Now, oh look, we'll do it. It's on the screen. Look at it, Snowvember. There we are. Apparently, it's snowing.
Well, it's not snowing.
Well, it is snow. Arctic plunge. There's going to be an Arctic plunge, apparently. So, yes, I mean, it's winter, isn't it? I hesitate to say this, but I'm not sure this is news, is it?
Well, I mean, there's supposed to be a 10-day chill that's meant to sweep across the country. It's not. Is it winter though yet? I'm not sure it is. Forecast up and down the UK, and temperatures could reach -7 degrees.
In winter.
It's not winter.
Well, the Met Office tweeted that several shots of Arctic air are on the way. This will annoy Greta, won't it? So we are going to ask, do you have any pictures maybe you want to send us of you in the snow at GB Views on Twitter or GBViews at GBnews.uk?
Try and not sound too enthusiastic, won't you?
Well, the point is it's not snowing yet either, is it? So they can't. So what is it? It's pictures in the snow from time gone by. What is it? Yeah, remember that time when you went skiing? Courchevel 15 years ago. Send us a pic. Anyway, right. That's what the weather's for. Anyway, right, OK, fine.
Let's go to some of your non-snow-related views. GBViews at GBnews.uk.
Lots of reaction to Prince William talking about overpopulation. Sorry, I'm getting shouted at quite badly now. Lots of people saying that he should keep his mouth shut. That's right, sorry. So basically, Prince William was saying that the population in Africa is growing at such a rate and is damaging the environment, basically. But Keith thinks that Prince William is right. So there you go. He thinks that actually essentially the African population should stop growing.
That's very sinister. But I think it's a bit unfair of people who say, well, you shouldn't raise concerns about the environment. You've had 3 kids. I mean, it's a bit of a cheap shot, and it's not really an argument, is it, to be honest?
No.
I mean, what are people just supposed to stop procreating? That's the rational, the logical conclusion to that argument. Just everybody don't have any more children to resolve the climate challenges we face. I'm not sure that's a very intellectual argument to be making.
No, probably not. Although, of course, Meghan and Harry have limited themselves to 2 children, haven't they?
Yes.
And they've done well there.
Yeah, I mean, when people say, oh, I'm not going to have children because I care about the environment, I just think, crack on, you go ahead. I'm going to have loads of children.
Right.
Yeah, it's a form of natural selection, really, you know.
Good grief. Well, yes, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I suspect, and call me a cynic when it comes to Meghan and Harry, but I suspect that they intend to lead quite busy lives, and that maybe having a small football team of children behind you might get in the way of that somewhat.
Not like they couldn't possibly afford nannies.
Well, that wouldn't really suit their image, would it? That wouldn't really suit their image, you know, palm the kids off on someone else.
Yeah.
You know, but there we go. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone who's been getting in touch. And, of course, on a more serious matter as well, of course, we did discuss grooming gangs right at the top of the show. It looks as though there may well be, there's certainly allegations anyway, of there being quite a serious incident in Hull. Lots of people getting in touch to say, basically, look, they feel as though now is the time for the police to actually step in and do something. There seems to be concerns that perhaps there's a bit of inaction, and this is from Gary, because the police might not want to come across as being racist. So that's a bit
I find it... I saw an interesting comment yesterday about there's a particular news channel, a national news channel, which every day has a climate update.
Oh, yes.
Let's not mention the name, but it does. It dedicates an hour. It tells you how much pollution in the... You know, that's not... I mean, there's so many more important issues I would have thought that people need. Knife crime, grooming gangs, all the other awful... Some people do, I think, but it's odd what the priorities are, I think, sometimes.
Yes, I'm inclined to agree. Now, keep all your thoughts coming into us, gbviews at gbnews.uk. We'll be back with more on today's top stories and plenty of your views after the break.
It's time to remind ourselves, there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, good morning. Some frost and fog about this morning, especially across southern parts of the UK. Otherwise, a lot of cloud cover. And an area of rain is moving south. Now, that rain associated with this cold front will bring about a change in the weather as it pushes south across the UK, but it spends most of the day moving its way south, so some early rain for parts of central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. That rain then moves eventually into northern England and North Wales by the end of the morning. Brighter skies follow for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some sunny spells, but a cold wind from the north will bring rattle of showers across northern and western Scotland, Northern Ireland as well, and it's cold enough for these to be falling as snow over the Scottish higher ground. After any mist and fog clears in the south, a lot of cloud cover, I think, for many through the rest of the day. This weather front essentially divides things north to south, with the cloudier skies in the south being eventually cleared away by the spell of rain. The rain on and off, I think, as it pushes south. Nothing particularly heavy or persistent as it moves into southern parts of the UK during the evening and the early hours of tomorrow. And for most, with the clearing skies behind the weather front, well, it'll be a chilly start to Thursday, a touch of frost in places. Enough of a breeze around coasts and across the far north to prevent a widespread frost. Further showers coming in here as well. But actually, once this cloud gets out of the way, for many it's a blue skies day. It's plenty of crisp late autumn sunshine. A bit more cloud coming into central and eastern parts of the UK by the afternoon. But for many it's looking dry. Around coast there will still be further showers, especially in the north and down through West Wales into Cornwall. Then the weather turns much more unsettled through Friday and into the weekend. There'll be very strong winds, a yellow warning in force for Friday and Saturday for many parts, and it will turn colder as well.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning, you're watching To The Point on GB News, and we're actually going to go straight to our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Home and Security Editor Mark White, who's live in Dover at the moment. Mark, just give us the situation at the moment.
Yeah, you join us in the middle of the English Channel. We are at the scene of the migrant rescue. I'm with the Sky presenter, Nigel Farage.
Or even
Oh, do you know what? I apologise. The GB News won't have it. The GB News presenter, Nigel Farage. We've been out since 6 this morning, probably explain something. I'm just going to get out of the way and we'll give you a shot. Nigel, this is a boat full of people from Iraq and Iran.
Yeah, 22 on board. There are 2 women. There's a child, very cold child. We have the child was a bit shivery. We've thrown a blanket into the kid. All the men wanted was cigarettes off me, but that's okay. And we've called Border Force, Coast Guard, and at the time we called and we were here, they had no assets to send. Why? There are multiple incidents as we speak of Dungeness. Everything's busy. But we have said to them, we do think you should get here quickly because there is a kid who's very, very cold. And it highlights through the winter just how dangerous this is going to be. And once again today, many hundreds will cross the English Channel.
And this boat here, as they saw us coming, they switched off their engine. This is something that they have been told to do by the people smugglers to try to guarantee.
Yeah, so the traffickers say, when you're met by a boat, turn the engine off immediately, because that then means that it turns into a search and rescue mission. Well, that's all well and good. However, we've got the shipping lanes. If you look just behind me here, major ships passing very. So it's a pretty perilous thing to turn the engine off when you're in this position. And I've been amazed over the last 20 months or so that I've really been following this closely. There's not been a major collision in the lanes. The biggest risk now, I think, is hypothermia. These people took off at 6 o'clock this morning. They told us, with wind direction as it was earlier on, it was rougher earlier on. We can water on board before they were 100 yards off the shore.
We'll just let Ben concentrate on the shore behind us again, Nigel. One thing, we were talking about switching the engine off there. The people smugglers have now become so sophisticated in terms of this is a tried and tested formula that works for them. It's not just the switching of the engine, is it? It's the dialing 999.
Yes, they dial 999, they say there's an emergency, they say they've got people seriously ill, they say they've got people in the water, because they know that way they'll get the fastest response time from our services. But very often it proves to be a complete hoax. We've had incidents in the last week of ambulances waiting at lifeboat stations and in harbours, and of course those ambulances could have been used elsewhere. So that side of it does make me pretty angry.
Now, the reason we're seeing a number of migrant boats coming across today is because we've had a few days where the weather's just not been that good at all, and they've not been able to come off from the French beaches to try to make this journey. But what we're seeing in the winter months, Nigel, is that when the weather allows, they will still try. We're at 25,000 now, if you include the numbers from today, over 20.
Well, no, I think we're probably more like 27, but whatever we are, you know, I said earlier on in this year it could be nearly 30,000. It will be 30,000 by Christmas, I've no doubt about that. And if we get one of those prolonged spells, you know, a big high pressure system, you know, frosty, calm, goodness knows how many may come.
It's an urgent crisis, we're being told, that the Home Secretary says she is on top of. We know it's a concern for the public. They've expressed this concern for some time now. The media seems to be picking up on this. What was notable this week, of course, was in the Commons just the level of anger and frustration being expressed by MPs of all parties aimed at the Home Secretary.
Yeah, we've got over 60,000 people now who illegally have come to the country, being housed everywhere. The North East, for example, is taking 17 times the numbers that the South East is taking. So right across the country, everyone's seeing this, everyone's feeling this, everyone's realising that it's the British taxpayer picking up the bill. Everyone sees it's 90% with no identity documents at all. What happened in Liverpool with a guy who had the bomb, who years had come illegally, failed his asylum claim and yet stayed in the country. People are now making the connection between what's happening here and that. And that's why MPs, particularly the Red Wall MPs, saying, why should we ever vote for you again? We voted Brexit. Orders that has turned in
all right, well look, thank you very much. I'm sorry, we're just going to have to come off it slightly because we're having a couple of issues with our sound, but I think those pictures speak for themselves, don't they, really? Mark White there and Nigel Farage in the channel, as you could see there, with a boat full of people.
And it's quite concerning. They were just saying there at the beginning that they have called for help. That's Mark and Nigel have called for help. It seems that you know, that they're too busy, the services that are meant to come and rescue these migrants from the channel. They've told them that they should come quickly. Nigel was just saying there does appear to be a small child on there, and obviously with the temperatures the way they are at the moment, there is a real risk of hypothermia, really, isn't there? So we'll bring you further updates on that as
look, this is undeniably an absolute catastrophe waiting to happen on numerous different levels, isn't it? How long is it before a boatload of people die? I mean, they may well have done already and we wouldn't necessarily know about it, would we? Because, you know, goodness knows that happens in the shipping lane, the boat goes under, whatever. I mean, it's terrifying stuff, and obviously it poses certain threats to us here, doesn't it, as well? But anyway.
Yes, well, let's return to our main programming, and as we say, we'll bring you those a bit later on. But here's what's on the menu for this hour. The boss of AstraZeneca has said that Europe is suffering a fourth wave of COVID hospital admissions because it delayed rolling out his company's vaccine to older people. We'll be talking to a virologist about this very shortly.
Yes, indeed. And in today's controversy, we'll be looking at virginity testing as a ban on the practice moves closer to becoming law. So people who take women abroad to carry out virginity testing will also not escape punishment, this according to a minister.
Yes, and we'll be discussing the Scottish Government decision not to extend its vaccine passport scheme to venues such as cinemas. So we'll bring you the update on that supposed U-turn by the government.
Yes, we've got all of that and much, much more as well. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Make sure that you get in touch.
Yes, but first, Patrick gives his views on European bureaucracy stifling the continent's vaccine rollout.
It's official. The European Union decided it would rather let its own citizens die than admit that Britain won the vaccine war. Basically, they chose to play petty politics over the AstraZeneca vaccine because they had their nose put out of joint after Britain managed to procure millions of doses before they did. And as a result of that, vast swathes of the continent are now in lockdown, there'll be mandatory vaccinations, their economies will take an absolute kicking, and huge civil unrest is erupting. In the Netherlands, police actually opened fire on protesters. A major reason for this is that the EU, instead of just holding up their hands and admitting that as an independent sovereign nation, Britain was able to negotiate niftily with large pharmaceutical companies and order bucket loads of vaccines, they decided to tell all their citizens that the particular jab Britain sorted first, AstraZeneca, was completely ineffective and that they shouldn't take it. Now, I should make it clear that I did actually assume that these vaccines would be better than they are. I think I can be forgiven for thinking that they would be more effective at stopping transmission and the effects of COVID, but I also have got serious concerns as well about any long-term data that may emerge about some of these jabs. However, we are where we are, as they say. But the EU had also procured a lot of AstraZeneca jabs and had them stockpiled. And because Britain had essentially shown the EU up for what it is, which is a slow-moving, overly bureaucratic, ultimately doomed political project run by underqualified narcissists on the take, they decided to tell their citizens not to take it. And here we are. Around 25 million Brits have had the AstraZeneca vaccine, 51% of all those who have been jabbed. But it's only been given to around 11% of people in the EU, with just 67 million doses used compared to 441 million Pfizer jabs. In France, just 8% of the doses delivered have been the Oxford jab, along with 11% in Germany, 16% in Belgium, 13% in Austria and 12% in the Netherlands. The number of people in intensive care has doubled in the past month in Austria, Belgium, Germany and the Netherlands, but rose only 17% in the UK. And with 48 patients per million people in Austria and 44 per million in Germany, their rates are triple the 14 per million in the UK. This is according to our world data. So I think we all need to do the right thing now and just say a big well done to the European Union. Another absolute gift in this story is that scientists also think that one of the reasons why Britain is emerging rather well at the moment is because of the high level of population immunity that we have, especially amongst the young. So for everyone who was banging on about we need more lockdowns, actually what we need is less of you. It's not the first time the EU has hung its citizens out to dry, is it? Just ask the people of Italy and Greece about the support they got from the EU during the early days of the migrant crisis, for example. The people of Europe now know for sure the European Union would rather that they died than lose a political argument.
Yeah, I mean, I won't agree with that last bit. I don't think the European...
I think they would. I'd stand by that.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying I don't agree with that. I do think the European Union does actually care about people's lives. But as you say, the number of ICU COVID patients per million, 14 in the UK, we have one of the lowest rates in Europe. Yes, of course, France cast lots of doubt on the AstraZeneca jab, but we have to remember as well there were later on some concerns around, I think it was blood clotting in particular with the AstraZeneca jab. Ultimately, the only people losing out of all of this are the people in the EU nations, which are now having to lock down, really strict lockdown. People of Austria, you know, they're talking about bringing in mandatory vaccine passports.
Mandatory vaccinations as well?
Mandatory vaccinations, sorry. So you have to, you will legally, if they have their way, have to be jabbed to be in Austria. I think it's unfortunate, but it's also worth noting, I think, that Germany does have a relatively high level of vaccination. So the thing with all this COVID data, it's very confusing. And when people say, oh, well, follow the data, or the science, I mean, there's been so many different... Nobody really knows what they're doing. There is no science. Everybody's pretty much guessing. And so what does annoy me is when people try and use other countries as a case study for what we should be doing here, when lots of countries which have tried all sorts of different things, ranging from the strictest measures to the most lenient, they're not necessarily better than where we are at the moment. And so there is no one answer to any of this.
No, and to kind of quote a well-known football chant, it's all gone quiet over there, hasn't it? Because for ages we were told, you know, oh, look, we're the sick man of Europe. Oh, look at our cases, look at our deaths. Boris Johnson's really screwed all of this up. Why aren't we doing this? They're doing that. Well, actually, now, basically, mainland Europe is knackered and we're OK. So I think this is one of the key things as well, which is the idea as well that when we had that kind of gap in lockdowns and some kids went back to school and stuff, that actually has done us quite a lot of good now as a nation, because there's a lot of natural immunity at play on top of a good vaccine rollout system. And Europe just hasn't had that. Europe, actually, vast swathes of it haven't had either of those things, actually. So,
I would like to hear some stronger language, I think, personally, in my opinion, from the government in terms of saying we won't follow the likes of what some countries are doing. I mean, Australia seems to have gone absolutely mental.
Insane.
Yeah, absolutely mental. New Zealand, lots of countries, Austria just mentioned there. And I do believe when the Health and Social Care Secretary Sajid Javid was asked whether we would ever bring in mandatory vaccines, his response was, well, that's not something the government would look at, which, I mean, I understand that's a no. It's quite a soft no. Sometimes I do wish, and I know why they're reluctant to do this, is because things change all the time, but sometimes I do want stronger language from the government to say, actually, we're not going to contemplate a full lockdown again in the way that we did before. But apparently half of the people surveyed in a survey the other day do want to see people who haven't been vaccinated locked down.
It's absolute rubbish. There's no way. I understand that is what the survey said, but it's just a lie. It's not true. And do you remember as well, while we were right at the height of this thing, you know, we're getting all these polling data, aren't we? 75% of people want a never-ending lockdown. No, they don't. I don't know where you find these people. They crawl out from under a rock somewhere every now and again and fill in a YouGov poll and then disappear back under it. There's no way that 50% of Brits want the unvaccinated locked down.
Yeah, and if it is statistically, there should be a big proportion of people watching this now then that do want perhaps lockdowns for people who haven't been double jabbed. Maybe that's you. So get in touch, actually, if you think we should have some form of a lockdown, or maybe we should actually introduce mandatory vaccinations like Austria have done, because this is an issue that people do feel very strongly about, and rightly so. Many people have lost loved ones from this disease. But I'm interested in trying to understand sort of who are these people and why would they want a full lockdown? I think some people do, but it'd be interesting to hear.
Yeah, look, if you do, then by all means email in and I may read it out. No, I will read it out. Balance. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Yes, a lot of you talking about what we showed you earlier. Nigel Farage is currently in the middle of the channel with Mark White, our Home and Security editor, and they are next to a migrant boat. They've called the authorities. Apparently on that boat is, I think you said, 22 people from Iraq and Iran. There's also a very cold child. There's 2 women, apparently, as well. And, basically a lot of people getting in touch to say, instead of the RNLI personnel and ambulances on standby at Dover, why don't we have helicopters on standby and military personnel so we can get these people lifted up? And I think that's an interesting take, Stephen, to be fair. I imagine it costs quite a lot of money to do that. But yeah, it's an interesting take, isn't it? Because, you know, there's a lot of people, the channel is massively busy, of course it is, but it's also a lot of just, like, you know, people out there for pleasure as well. And, you know, if you're in a small boat yourself, you know, sailing boat or something like that, or on a jet ski or whatever, and you get into difficulty now, there's every chance that the RNLI and people like that are going to be dealing with migrants coming over and not able to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just does show you that the images we were showing you earlier of that migrant boat, and hopefully we'll be going back to Mark and Nigel shortly. It shows you the human aspect of it as well, because we can get a bit caught up in saying, you know, let's ship them off back to France, or let's all sorts of proposals. But the fact there's a child right now in one of those boats and it's freezing. I was out a bit early and I was freezing and I was in a big coat and a scarf. So, you know, we have to obviously rescue these people and we have to make sure they're safe and sound. And I think it's important to remember the human element of this. They are the people that are suffering most from all of this.
Yeah, it was interesting view as well of some of the tactics that these people are using as well. So they're told to turn off their outboard motor when they see a boat coming, because then that means they're stationary and that means that it becomes a search and rescue operation as opposed to them just travelling here, basically. And so that's what they did. So it was interesting to see it firsthand, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed. But coming up, virginity testing will not go unpunished in the UK as MPs backed a ban on the indefensible practice in England. We'll talk about that very shortly. But first, the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, good morning. Some frost and fog about this morning, especially across southern parts of the UK. Otherwise, a lot of cloud cover. And an area of rain is moving south. Now, that rain associated with this cold front will bring about a change in the weather as it pushes south across the UK, but it spends most of the day moving its way south. So some early rain for parts of central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. That rain then moves eventually into northern England and North Wales by the end of the morning. Brighter skies follow for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some sunny spells, but a cold wind from the north will bring rattle of showers across northern and western Scotland, Northern Ireland as well, and it's cold enough for these to be falling as snow over the Scottish higher ground. After any mist and fog clears in the south, a lot of cloud cover, I think, for many through the rest of the day. This weather front essentially divides things north to south, with the cloudier skies in the south being eventually cleared away by the spell of rain. The rain on and off, I think, as it pushes south. Nothing particularly heavy or persistent as it moves into southern parts of the UK during the evening and the early hours of tomorrow. And for most, with the clearing skies behind the weather front, well, it'll be a chilly start to Thursday, a touch of frost in places. Enough of a breeze around coasts and across the far north to prevent a widespread frost. Further showers coming in here as well. But actually, once this cloud gets out of the way, for many it's a blue skies day. It's plenty of crisp late autumn sunshine. A bit more cloud coming into central and eastern parts of the UK by the afternoon. But for many it's looking dry. Around coast there will still be further showers, especially in the north and down through West Wales into Cornwall. Then the weather turns much more unsettled through Friday and into the weekend. There'll be very strong winds, a yellow warning in force for Friday and Saturday for many parts, and it will turn colder as well.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Yes, morning everybody. Thank you very much for everyone who's been tuning in and also getting involved with our inbox as well. gbviews@gbnews.uk will be going to that shortly.
Yes, now for our next story, MPs have unanimously agreed to outlaw virginity testing. In England, Health Minister Edward Argar told MPs in the Commons the practice, which involves an intrusive vaginal examination and it's used by many Muslim communities to check girls and women are still virgins, is repressive, causing long-term physical and psychological damage. That's what he said.
Well, the World Health Organization says the testing is a violation of human rights. The amendment to the Health and Care Bill means anyone in England helping girls or women get these tests in the UK or overseas will face an unlimited fine or up to 5 years in prison.
Yes, well, we're joined now by Anita Prem, the founder of the Freedom Charity, which was instrumental in making forced marriage a criminal offence and has been working hard to make virginity testing as well a criminal offence. Anita's book, But It's Not Fair, and Cut Flowers are part of the national curriculum, and she's donated 65,000 books to school children and spoken to thousands of children as well about forced marriage, FGM and virginity testing. So definitely a big expert on this issue. Just talk us through, first of all, because this will be alien to many people, what is virginity testing and why is it carried out?
So virginity testing, very basically, is where it could be a medical practitioner, it could be in a backstreet clinic, it could be in somebody's house, where a girl is often taken, unbeknown why she's being taken to this clinic, and then somebody removes her underwear and tries to insert, I'm sorry, this is a bit graphic, tries to insert 2 fingers into her vagina. And if they can insert the 2 fingers, they say, well, she's not a virgin. And if they can't, then they say she is, because they want to ensure that the hymen is intact, which is complete nonsense, because not every girl is born with a hymen. It might not be there for a dozen different reasons, nothing to do with the fact whether they're a virgin or not. And this practice is abhorrent, and it's going on right now in this country in top clinics from Harley Street all the way to the back of a chemist. So, and we've been campaigning for a number of years for this to be a criminal offence. The damage it causes to girls is truly unbelievable. They feel they've been sexually violated, they feel they've been abused, and there's no good reason for it. How dare someone demand that a girl's hymen is intact in order for her to be married? It's completely wrong, but the bill is missing a trick. Hymenoplasty is where people have a piece of skin inserted around their vagina to prove that they're a virgin. So on their wedding night, they will bleed. That isn't going to be made a criminal offence in this bill, and we're demanding it is, because you can't have hymenoplasty without doing a virginity test. So they're going to still be able to do these tests covertly, because on the guides that someone's going to have this hymenoplasty, so-called hymen repair.
Yeah, I mean, it is harrowing stuff, absolutely harrowing stuff. And what is the wider issue here in terms of, this is clearly the idea in some cultures, is it that you have to be a virgin when you get married, is that right?
It is, and the fact that boys and young men aren't subjected to any kind of test, because you couldn't, why on earth are girls and young women subjected to this form of sexual abuse? It's completely wrong, and it's only by talking about it and by bringing it up that we're now really successfully going to make it a crime. But it's still going to be a number of months before this becomes a crime, and girls will still be allowed to legally have this test done in the United Kingdom.
I mean, it is harrowing stuff, and it's also not just, I know we're talking now about virginity testing, but FGM still goes on, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, FGM has been a criminal offence for over 20 years, but this is so hidden by secrecy, by professionals not wanting to talk about it, by this just being such a hidden crime. We've only had one successful prosecution in this country. And these are hidden crimes, and we use the term dishonour because there is no honour involved in forcing girls to be subjected to the worst kind of abuse. And these girls are powerless to do anything about it. If they were to talk out about it, they'll be disowned, they could be murdered. So it's really important the law is on their side. And actually, for many families, knowing that they can't come to this country, because many people come here as tourists to have this done. So it's not only UK girls. But the good thing for me on this law is, if someone sends a girl abroad to have this test done, it's still going to be a criminal offence and they have to be brought back to the country. I think it's going to be hopefully within 3 days, and the family can be prosecuted if they've subjected her to this virginity test. So that's important.
Can I just ask, what kind of cultures, what communities does this tend to take place in? Because I must say this is all very alien to me.
It is very alien. And when we talk about it, I was in a school a week ago and I was talking to young boys from a very wide, diverse community group, and they were completely shocked to hear about it. And all the boys stood up and said, "Not in my name. Do not force a girl to have a virginity test because you think we want to have a virgin bride." Because actually, there's absolutely no proof that just because you've had this virginity test done that you are a virgin. You know, if someone uses sanitary products, they might have broken their hymen, if they've done sports. So this is really not acceptable. In terms of communities, it's pretty widespread. There's no religion that says this is acceptable. So it happens across a variety of cultures and communities in this country.
And can I just ask, will this be actually enforced? Because we already know, in terms of other sexual crimes, for example, like rape, the prosecution rates are really low. And this seems like it would depend on the girl actually being able to tell somebody about it. I mean, would they be even able to prove, the police, that this took place at all? So whilst this is a great policy, do you think it will actually be enforced? And how would they actually have the burden of proof to show that this happened to somebody?
Well, I think it's really important that if it's a crime, when a girl is told, if she is told she's going to have it, she can say this is a criminal offence and report it to the police before it happens. So that's important. The fact is that we go into schools at Freedom Charity and speak to young children, young girls and boys, and let them know that this is going to be a crime, be it forced marriage, FGM, whatever it is. The fact they know that means that they're empowered to make a difference. Means that they can speak out and their friends can speak out, and communities and teachers and people that are supporting and helping them know that they have the weight of the law. Sadly, you are relying on the most vulnerable girls to come forward and talk out about it. And I know that's always going to be difficult, but the alternative is going through with this virginity test and then maybe being forced into a marriage, because part of the marriage contract used to be, on arranged marriages, they would ask to see a photograph of the young woman, the young girl. Could she cook? Could she clean? What was her education requirements? Which is completely outrageous. And then the other question now they're asking is, can you prove a virginity test? Can you show a certificate from a clinician to say this girl is a virgin? This is outrageous. We're not asking, we demanded for this to become a criminal offence, but we're also demanding hymenoplasty is too. So girls aren't subject to go through major surgery, or a piece of skin is put over their vagina, and on their wedding night they'll bleed. That has to be part of the law too. You can't do half measures here.
Peter Prem, thank you so much for joining us, founder of Freedom Charity, which helps people affected by these issues and, of course, talks to children and advocates for the abolition of these things as well. And I suppose the other thing is, because this law is now coming into force, that might act as a deterrent as well to parents or family members who want to do these virginity tests on young women, because they'll sort of know that this is actually against the law and they could be prosecuted. So hopefully that's some of the effect as well that this law will have.
This kind of thing stems fundamentally from the weakness of men, right? And the lack of self-confidence and everything. It's why, you know, in my opinion, it wants this, because they're absolutely terrified of the idea, I think, that she may have been with anyone else before. Yeah. You know, and why is that? What is that about? It's about, you know, the total hollowness of some blokes there, really. You know, absolutely no self-confidence whatsoever.
Well, let us know what you think, gbvs at gbnews.uk. But for now, we're actually going to go back to our home and security editor, Mark White, who is live in the English channel. Mark joins us again. He joined us a bit earlier, and he was with Nigel Farage, of course, of GB News, and they were actually with a migrant boat. They were next to a migrant boat, which had a number of people on it, I think just over 20 people. Mark, I can see you're still there. Just give us the latest on what's been going on since we last saw you.
Well, this incident is still very much ongoing, an active incident. The boat that is there at the moment, we're joined again by GB News presenter Nigel Farage. You can see the boat is still there. It's been over an hour. Some real concerns because there's a young child on board actually looking a bit worse for wear.
Yeah, there's a very, very cold child. We did throw a blanket on board, but you know what? When you're wet, a blanket isn't much use. So the helicopter's just been over from Lydd to assess the situation as to whether they're going to winch the child off. But finally, we've got Dover lifeboat
just coming in there. Yeah.
Just coming in now, about a third of a mile away, half a mile away from us now. So,
and it's bombing. It's going to be here in a couple of minutes, isn't it?
And the worry they've got at this time of the year, wet people. Somebody gets hypothermia and that sets in, they can be gone pretty quickly. Yeah. So the helicopter obviously, had that lifeboat, as I say, we've been an hour already, had that lifeboat been further away, they would have winched a man down onto the deck here and got the child off.
I mean, some people might think, they're a bit cold, that's trivial, but it's not. No. We have seen at least 8 deaths, mainly due to hypothermia, on the French side of the Channel in recent days, weeks, and probably more than that, people that have actually drowned and haven't been recovered yet as well. So a very significant and real problem there. They were concerned, obviously, for the child, the men, they wanted a cigarette, but obviously there's concern for the child. Nigel, today we witnessed again this boat here. We've heard multiple incidents underway, so much so, we should say, in fact, that the Border Force vessels tasked are on other operations. The lifeboats have been tasked on other operations.
One slight correction, Border Force have been out since very early this morning, and they were picking up in the dark. At the moment, most of Border Force are tied up in the dock in Dover.
Because they're out of hours.
Because they're out of hours. And the volunteer lifeboat crews are being left to pick up the slack. And that, I think, is why we've sat with this now for over an hour. And I mean, Border Force just isn't fit for purpose.
Yeah. As we speak to you, Nigel, we just want to get, as the lifeboat is getting closer now and into our range, we'll just concentrate on that. This is an issue, isn't it? These are volunteers. They have full-time jobs,
Yes,
and they have to have the cooperation, goodwill of an employer to come out and attend these calls. But when they are happening, back-to-back calls, the Dover lifeboat in particular, and Dungeness, they're always out. It seems pretty much any day there is activity in the Channel from small boats. They're tasked to respond to that. You have to be a pretty understanding employer if you're going to allow your employee to come out all the time and do what these guys are doing.
So just this morning, the Walmer lifeboat's been out, a smaller lifeboat. Dover's been out repeatedly. Dungeness looks like being busy all day. I saw the Littlestone rib out working at the weekend. And quite a lot of people have actually resigned from the lifeboats because they say we can't afford to do this. Running our own businesses, whatever it is. The worry is that what will happen, because of the amount of work they've got to do, they'll start paying people to be on the lifeboats. And when you do that, you take away everything it stood for 170 years. And that really is, to me, a very deep concern.
And, we've got to be, fair and absolutely point out that what we're not doing is criticising the lifeboat service, because what they are doing is incredible work, but the way in which the system is structured, there are not enough Border Force vessels, and it falls on these volunteers to come out time and time again.
Yeah, we're not criticising the crews on the lifeboats at all, but at some point the RNLI should be saying to government, we're not here to be a taxi service, we're not here to do the backup work for Border Force. And frankly, when people give money to the lifeboats in the street, they're giving it for genuine rescues. They're not giving it to do border forces work and bring people who are illegally crossing the channel into the UK, and that is a real issue.
So this is quite incredible, the images that we're now seeing here. This is a mid-channel. It will be deemed a search and not a search, but a rescue operation.
It will, because the engine's turned off.
Yeah.
Because they turned the engine off, it will be deemed to be.
But because of the concern for the child as well.
And yes,
we've had the Coast Guard helicopter up, now the lifeboat here. You're watching all this unfold here on GB News. We've been out since before 6 a.m. this morning. We've heard of a lot of activity again. We expected that there would be significant numbers, and in fact, to our right now, it's on the long end of the lens, but you should be able to see the Coast Guard helicopter coming over. There will be an assessment made of that child on board the vessel. If it's deemed that that child is in a very poorly state of health, it's very possible that this Coast Guard helicopter may winch that child up rather than going through the longer journey back to Dover. That's a tried and tested rescue procedure that they have at sea. So as you see the helicopter circling round our boat, the lifeboat is just reaching the migrants now as well, Nigel.
Yes.
The Dover lifeboat 1709 just coming up to that boat. Not the smallest of migrant boats, but still, you know, a fairly small and flimsy vessel, about 8 metres long?
7, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, the bigger ones are 11, and the rumours are there are ones up to 20 metres long that'll be coming next year. You know, and they will obviously be very pleased to get in somewhere nice and warm. But yeah, the burden on the lifeboat crew, the cost of all of this that is going on every day is enormous. And, you know, we've been listening to the channels this morning. I mean, this is constant work for the ferries, for commercial vessels to try and avoid these craft. Mercifully to date, no major collisions, but it's only a matter of time.
And I think it's important for our viewers to see these images and to see them live, thankfully through the technology, as long as it lasts out in the middle of the channel, because they hear and they see the pictures constantly of people coming back, usually to Dover or Dungeness. This is the reality of what is happening in the channel day after day with these operations to pick up people on these vessels. They are not short, snappy operations. They are protracted in the way that they unfold. It takes a while for either Border Force or the lifeboats to get out here. If they're dealing with other calls, it takes them much longer. As we know, this has been well over an hour that these people have been sitting with their engine cut off, switched off themselves, by the way, hoping to be rescued. They probably thought they would be rescued a bit quicker than this. But the rescue services, the lifeboats and Border Force are busy. But Border Force, we were hearing, we're out of hours, Nigel.
Out of hours, absolutely ridiculous. So the rope about to be thrown by the looks of it.
Basically, they'll be taken on board. Now that lifeboat may make its way immediately back to Dover, especially depending on the condition of the young child on board.
Yes.
But quite often, of course, Nigel, what happens is another call comes in and that lifeboat will be tasked to pick up more people.
That's right. I mean, you know, we're hearing that the Dungeness lifeboat, as we speak, is dealing with multiple incidents. At the moment, we haven't heard of any other boats in this part of the channel, but hey, we stumbled across this boat. This boat had got to here without being reported by any other type of shipping. So who's to say we won't in the next few minutes ourselves see another boat?
In terms of solutions to this issue, we've heard an awful lot about trying to come up with return schemes with various countries. Is one of the potential solutions this idea of offshore processing centres rather than taking them back to Dover as they are at the moment?
Well, to get them to an offshore processing centre, they need to come to Dover first and then be flown out of the country. I think all the while we're part of the European Convention on Human Rights, the lawyers would make that virtually impossible. And alongside, so they're about to come off that dinghy. is not very strong anyway. There'll be all sorts of accusations.
We've heard Albania for one.
Yeah, but it's not going to happen,
No.
you know. And when the Australians tried that, there were all sorts of allegations of abuse. Returns to France is the only way we can do this.
Okay. Well, this rescue operation now well underway. The Dover lifeboat, you can see, now involved in picking up those migrants. Yet another rescue here in the middle of the English Channel, one of numerous that have taken place throughout the day and are continuing. Into the studio.
Wow. Gripping stuff, eh? Gripping stuff. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, Nigel. And Ben, our trusty cameraman, as well, for bringing those live images to us as the RNLI gets involved with another migrant boat.
Yeah, and thanks for bearing with us with those few technical issues. Obviously, they're in the middle of the English Channel, so that's to be expected. But yes, they've been with that boat. They were there for quite a while. Mark White and Nigel Farage. There was a child on board that they said did not look in good shape. Obviously, the temperatures are very low at the moment.
And that's why the helicopter was up there as well.
Yeah, very real risk of hypothermia. Those people were in that boat for quite a while, and I believe they said I'm assuming they were hoping they'd be rescued quicker, but the rescue services were busier, so it did take longer than would have been expected.
Well, exactly, and he said that basically there are other boats, of course. There are border force boats. Apparently they're out of hours, so they're not going to be picking people up in the channel at the moment. And also, as well, the RNLI are dealing with multiple incidents as we speak. So that's why it took quite a long period of time.
Yes.
What do you make of what you've just seen there, ladies and gentlemen? I think it's incredible to see it happening, just unfolding before your eyes, isn't it? It's all very well and good looking at the odd picture in a newspaper or something like that, but live footage there of migrants being essentially winched onto an RNLI boat.
Yeah, and what strikes me actually is I think Mark said he counted about 22 people on that boat, and when you think about that's just one smaller boat, they get much bigger than that. But when we think about, there was a point where I think we had 1,000 or something. Can't remember if it was in a day or a weekend. But those boats, the sort of the number of those you'd have to get to those figures that we see on a daily basis. This is a relentless operation on the part of the rescue services, and you can see the amount of resources that have had to just go into just rescuing this one boat. You had a helicopter there, obviously you have the volunteers, and so it gives you just an idea of the scale of this challenge and the scale of this crisis.
Yeah, Nigel made, I thought, a very salient point there. Lots of you have been getting in touch with this, and indeed Julian has just emailed in. The RNLI is a charity. Donations are made to run this charity, not to go pulling illegal immigrants out of the channel. So thank you for that, Julian. And this is a fascinating one now, isn't it? So if the RNLI are picking up the scraps of what our border force can't do, so our border force essentially is not fit for purpose. So what that means is that the RNLI, as a lifeboat, obviously, gets a call and goes, can you go and rescue this boatload of people? Now, they say yes to that. That's their decision, whatever. So if they said no to it, then actually what would happen? Potentially the border force would have to be bolstered. We don't know. But at the moment, this is not a dig at the RNLI at all, but I think it's a fact. If you donate to the RNLI at the moment, are you in a roundabout way helping to fund the kind of illegal movement of people across the channel? Because they're rescuing people, aren't they? They're saving people, and they are bringing them to Britain. I'm not having a pop with the RNLI. I'm just saying, is that that's where your donations go?
Well, I think it's very important to avoid that, because they're there. Their primary thing is to save human lives. When medical, people, ambulance services are called out to somebody who is, I don't know, on a rampage, a terrorist who's out and just killed multiple people, and that person's injured, they're not going to be caring about the politics of it. The ambulance service will tend to whoever they see in front of them there, regardless of who they are, regardless of what they've done. And in a similar vein, the RNLI, they're there to save lives. They don't care about the politics, and they shouldn't care about the politics. So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I wouldn't want to drag them into the sort of political debate about this.
No, absolutely. Well, loads of you again have been getting in touch, and clearly most of you are pretty convinced that they should be being taken back to France and not brought to our shores here, as is indeed Ray. So there we are. Thank you everyone who's been getting in touch. Well, we're just going to move away from that for the moment, I believe.
Yes, yesterday in a speech at a conference attended by the Prime Minister, the Brexit Minister Lord Frost stated that Britain cannot carry on as it was before Brexit and must cut taxes and reduce regulation. And all this comes after reports of concern about a growing rift in number 10 between ministers and Boris Johnson.
Well, this seems to have been compounded by a chaotic speech given by the Prime Minister to the Confederation of British Industry on Monday. You know the one. Spoke about Peppa Pig and did a car noise. Anyway, joining us now is the former Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade and the MP for Brent North. It's Barry Gardiner. Thank you very much, Barry. We heard from the Taxpayers Alliance earlier on in this show that's about, basically they're saying that there needs to be tax cuts. We can't keep hiking tax. Where do you stand on this?
Well, Lord Frost is the Brexit minister, and in Brexit, we were told that we were going to take back control of our borders. Your previous clip showing all that is going on in the Channel has shown that that has not happened. In fact, what we have is border chaos. And in fact, the government has closed down the legal and safe routes for migrants to come into this country, which is why they've actually pushed people into the hands of those human traffickers. So I think you can see that all that was spoken of before Brexit by Lord Frost and by the Prime Minister has failed to materialise. Now, in addition to that, the farmers said they wanted Brexit. They've seen their fruit, their vegetables rotting on the vine because there's not enough people to pick them. They've seen their pigs culled, not for food, because they can't get their pig meat into the supermarkets because of a lack of vets. This has been chaos, absolute chaos. And of course, the Prime Minister famously said that there would be no border down the Irish Sea. That, of course, is now what Lord Frost is having to cope with, and that's why he was looking to invoke Article 16 to cancel the arrangements between the UK and the EU. So I think all that Lord Frost has told us in the past has turned out not to be the case. Many of us were warning about this at the time, but the government did not prepare, did not take any notice of us. And now Lord Frost says what we need to do is to cut taxes. Well, look, Amazon and companies like that are not paying their fair share of UK tax. Let's begin to see where the revenues can stack up in the Treasury from business. Let's make sure that instead of when you introduce, like the government did yesterday, the health and care bill, that the bill for care in old age is not going to force people to sell their houses, but in the poorest parts of our country, that's exactly what is now going to happen. They will pay a far larger proportion of the value of their house than somebody in a wealthier part of the country. So if you want to talk taxes, then Lord Frost really needs to start talking about fair taxation and making sure that Amazon and others are paying their fair share.
All right, Barry, a succession of points there. Thank you very, very much. And it was good to see you as well the other day, actually, in the flesh in our GB News studio. Hopefully we can get you back in again soon. Barry Gardiner there, of course. Well, we're just going to go time, I think, maybe for one or two views quickly before we call it a day. People, look, I mean, obviously the footage that we brought you there of Nigel Farage and Mark White in the Channel with the RNLI picking up a migrant boat live before your very eyes. Some people just saying, look, actually, these human traffickers need to be stopped. I mean, it's big business, isn't it? And that's from Chris, by the way. He's raising issues there about the human trafficking and the extent of it, frankly,
Yes, indeed. Well, that will have to be it from us here at To The Point. But keep your views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk, across all the programmes that we have. And I'm sure Gloria will pick up some of your views that you sent in a bit later. And yes, up next is Gloria De Piero with the briefing. So stay with her for that. But first, let's bring you the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, I'll get on to today's weather in just a moment, but just flagging that at the end of the week, some very windy weather is likely and things are going to be turning colder again as well, which brings the threat of a bit of snow also. But back to today, low pressure is swinging its way to the north of the UK, and this cold front is driving south, introducing colder air across Scotland and Northern Ireland. But it does mean here it'll be a bit brighter through the afternoon with some sunshine. Lots of showers, though, packing into the north and west. Mostly of rain at this stage, and we've got this line of rain on the weather fronts, clearing away from southern Scotland, but turning damp over northwest England, north and west Wales. Much of the south, dry and cloudy, 1 or 2 showers for Kent and the southwest. And temperatures here might creep up to double figures, but colder air is following on from this band of wet weather, this cold front. As it continues to track southwards through the evening, the rain could pep up for a time over South Wales and southwest England. Clearer skies following, and the showers turning more and more wintry over the hills of northern Scotland, even some snow to low levels for a time, and strong winds as well, and a much colder feel for Thursday morning. Temperatures in most towns and cities may just be above freezing, but it's going to feel cold with that wind. And then generally it's a fine and sunny day to come tomorrow for most. We'll keep wintry showers going over northern Scotland, although the winds may ease a little through the day. A few showers grazing the east coast of England, and 1 or 2 for West Wales and maybe southwest England also. But for the vast majority, it's a sunny but cold day. Temperatures struggling, 7, 8 at best. Add on that wind and it feels even colder. And we're not done with the winds, because they're going to strengthen further. This low pressure heading south will bring colder air come the end of the week, and those isobars really squeezing together. Initially across Scotland on Friday, we have a Met Office warning in place for that. And then more widely on Saturday across the UK, some very strong gusty winds, the potential for some disruption, and there could be a bit of snow mixed in as well.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio.